James Orengo has released a bad evening message that has shook the nation. Welcome to Kenyan Media, where we bring you news updates as they break, and kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing. Now, in an African setup, there's a proverb that says, when the roots of a tree begin to decay, it spreads death to the branches. And in Kenya's growing debate over taxation and the rising cost of living, that warning is now echoing through the country's political landscape. Siaya Governor James Orengo is warning that public anger could intensify if concerns surrounding the proposed Finance Bill 2026 are ignored. The veteran opposition figure says that the country is approaching a dangerous moment, one where economic pressure, rising taxes, and also public frustration could collide. The warning comes as a debate over the Finance Bill 2026 gains momentum across the country. Speaking through a statement posted on his official X account on Friday, May 22nd, Orengo called for heightened public scrutiny of the proposed legislation, saying every Kenyan has a duty to examine measures that could directly affect the household incomes and also daily survival. At the center of his message is a concern over taxation, and Orengo argues that ordinary citizens are already struggling under the weight of high cost of living, expensive fuel, rising food prices, and also shrinking disposable income. According to him, any additional tax burden introduced through proper consultation could deepen economic hardship for millions of families. This year, Governor urged Kenyans not to treat public participation as a routine government process, and instead he described it as a critical democratic safeguard designed to protect citizens from policies that may negatively affect their livelihoods. He insisted that every clause within the finance bill must be carefully examined to ensure that ordinary Kenyan is not pushed further into economic distress. In his statement, Orengo said citizens must remain vigilant and as the bill moves through parliament and other legislative processes. He warned that failure to address public concerns would fuel dissatisfaction across the country. The governor also accused the government of failing to adequately respond to growing frustrations of economic conditions. He linked the debate around the finance bill to broader concerns about governance, accountability, and the relationship between the state and also its citizens. Orengo's remarks reflect a wider national conversation that has been building in recent months. And across Kenya, concerns over taxation have become increasingly sensitive, and many households continue to grapple with the rising living costs at a time when incomes remain under pressure. For many workers, business owners, and also families, daily expenses have continued to climb, forcing difficult financial choices. Fuel prices remain a major concern, and transport costs have increased in many parts of the country, affecting food distribution and also commodity prices. At the same time, many Kenyans say their purchasing power has weakened as taxes and also deductions continue to rise. That growing pressure has now placed the Finance Bill 2026 at the center of the national political debate. Different political leaders, parties, and civil society groups are increasingly questioning whether the country's fiscal policies are striking the right balance between government revenue collection and also the welfare of citizens. Orengo says transparency must guide the process. He argues that Kenyans have a constitutional right to understand how proposed taxes will affect their lives before the legislation is passed into law. He further warned that leaders who fail to listen to public concerns risk widening the gap between government and citizens. The Siaya governor also issued a political warning directed to President William Ruto and his administration. He suggested that public frustration could continue to grow if the government maintains that he described as a hardline approach to governance and also economic policy. Orengo claimed that failure to respond to public concerns would trigger stronger political resistance and also increased civic action. And while his comments have already attracted political attention, they also underline the increasingly tense atmosphere surrounding economic management in Kenya. The finance bill has historically been one of the most politically sensitive pieces of legislation in the country. That is because it directly determines how the government raises revenue through taxes and levies. For ordinary citizens, those decisions are often felt immediately through higher prices, reduced income, or increased operational costs for businesses. This latest debate comes at a time when many Kenyans are still recovering from the prolonged economic strain, and small traders continue to face difficult business conditions. Civil servants as salaried workers are also expressing concerns over shrinking take-home pay, and farmers, transport operators, and informal sector workers have similarly raised questions about law in additional taxation could affect their survival. Political pressure around the finance bill is now expanding beyond opposition voices, and the Jubilee Party has also entered the debate, openly calling on Kenyans to reject the proposed legislation. Speaking during a press briefing held at the party headquarters on Wednesday, May 20th, former Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i warned that the bill could worsen the already difficult economic situation facing ordinary citizens. Matiang'i argued that the proposed measures would place a heavier burden on workers, particularly civil servants. According to him, increased taxation would reduce workers' earnings and further strain household budgets. The former cabinet secretary said many Kenyans are already struggling to meet basic needs, and additional deductions could deepen frustration among working families. He also warned that excessive taxation risks damaging morale among employees who feel their income is increasingly consumed by statutory deductions and also taxes. The growing criticism from both opposition figures and former government officials highlight how politically charged the finance bill debate has become. And for the government, the challenge remains balancing national revenue needs with public expectation for economic relief. And Kenya continues to face significant fiscal pressures, including debt obligations, development financing, and demand for public services. At the same time, citizens are demanding policies that protect household incomes and also reduce the cost of living, and that balancing act has become one of the defining political and economic tests facing the country. Public attention is now expected to focus closely on parliamentary discussions, stakeholder consultations, and also public participation forums linked to the finance bill. Economic analysts say the coming weeks could shape not only fiscal policy but also the broader political mood in the country. For many Kenyans, the debate is no longer just about numbers on paper. It is about survival. It is about whether families can afford food, transport, school fees, rent, and also healthcare. And it is about whether citizens believe their voices are being heard in decisions that directly affect their lives. As scrutiny over the finance bill intensifies, pressure is mounting on leaders across the political divide to demonstrate accountability, transparency, and also responsiveness to public concerns. The national conversation is expected to remain heated as Parliament prepares to examine the proposed measures. And with political tensions already rising, the outcome of that debate could have far-reaching consequences for both the economy and also the country's political climate. And for now, one message is becoming increasingly clear, and in a country already weighed down by economic pressure, many Kenyans are demanding not just taxation but fairness, consultation, and relief. Because when the burden becomes too heavy for ordinary citizens to carry, the voices calling for change often grow louder than those defending the system itself. That is all, at least for now, from Kenya Lens Media, where we bring you news updates as they break. And kindly, if you're new here, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing our content.